welcome to the Sunshine Sound Podcast with your host, Christine Matthias.
I love the process of recording in the studio. I love taking something from nothing and turning it into a final mix because I think there's so much art that you can add into mixing that a lot of musicians don't get to experience. And it's that mixing, when you're laboring over something that it's recorded a certain way and everything sounds clean, but you're like, I just want to add something. It's not gritty enough.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Sunshine Sound Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. So for today's episode, I interviewed Tommy Bobcat, who happens to be my husband. So when I first came up with the idea for this podcast, I didn't plan on interviewing Tom, but as I started brainstorming the people I wanted to talk to, it was like, well, Tom's a musician, and we have a lot of these interesting discussions together about what it means to be a musician and the challenges we run into. So why not? So today we talked about a lot of interesting topics like experimental music, production values, mixing as a creative process, and also stage fright and performing. So I hope you enjoy this one. Okay, so today in the studio, I have Tommy Bobcat. So he's a local musician here in San Diego. He's played in a ton of bands. I've known this guy for a while. So he's played as both a bass player, and now he's really shifted gears to being a full-time guitar player.
Yes. Quite the shift in gears, too.
And so he
came out of the closet as a guitar player.
He's currently in Denim Robot with me as the guitar player. But he also releases his own solo experimental music, which I'm looking forward to hearing about today. So in addition to that, he is one of the co-founders of Sunshine Sound Center. He's a great audio engineer, and he also happens to be my husband. So I know a little bit about this guy. So thanks for making the journey here from the next room over.
Sure,
I appreciate it.
My legs are a little tired, but it's plenty of coffee here, so we'll be good to go.
Yeah, we're great. We're all caffeinated and good to go. So Tommy, we work together on Denim Robot, but I really would like to hear more about your solo stuff, which you release as Tommy Bobcat. So tell us about that. Like, what is Tommy Bobcat, the musician?
Well, I would say that it's, for the most part, just music that nobody else wants to play with me on. I've been in bands before, and we tried to push the experimental stuff, and either they didn't want to hear it when we played it out live, or we just got sick of it playing it with each other. And I think that maybe it's just I'm a control freak or whatever, but I'd love to find people that like to play that kind of stuff, but they're few and far between, or maybe they're just at home making that wacky music. But I just started doing it on my own because it was stuff that wouldn't fit in other projects, or I was writing too many songs and they wouldn't go in with these other bands that I was in. But a lot of it's mostly stuff that seems to only really work in the studio. I do a lot of, I don't know how to say, like, I take artistic liberties with the sound, with the mixing and the audio production on it. So I purposely try to, degrade recordings and stuff like that to get the sound that I want, which I'm not sure if it would work live, but I'm trying to convey kind of a certain feeling in the mix itself. So that's kind of another reason why. And also I guess I think it goes back to the control thing. It's just
sure. So do you play all of the instruments that are yeah.
I do play all the instruments. Now playing is a bit of might be a stretch. I program the drums. Sometimes I just find drum loops. There was a while that I was looking for odd time drum loops like 7/8 and things like that to play on. I've gotten a little lazy with the progressive stuff because it's just like, do I really want to spend all this time trying to record a guitar part in 7 and like 11? And it's like for no reason. It's like, nobody's even going to listen to this. Like, what am I doing? I think for a while it was practice. My first solo album was, I want to learn how to play over odd time signatures. And it was like, this is the way to do it. Record what you're doing, turn them all into songs, and there you go. You learned how to play hard stuff, and now you got a record.
Sure. So in terms of instrumentation, so you're playing guitar. Like, what other live instruments are you actually recording?
I do the guitar, bass, vocals, and I do keyboards. I will say that there have definitely been times that I quantize. I mean, because I'm doing everything.
Sure. So you record at least the keyboards all through MIDI, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But what about the guitar and the bass? That's just live. Can't quantize that, right?
Yeah, no. And I use, ever since the beginning here, when I started doing my solo stuff in, what would that be, 2010. I use Guitar Rig and other software plugs, so I don't record any actual amps. Now, without getting to my own preferences too much, that's nice because I can click through different amps and change it till the cows come home. Now, the sound quality or the tone, if you're going for a specific tone, maybe you can't dial it in as much as you'd like, but the versatility is just amazing. So I use that for guitar and bass. I never actually record them in the room. It's all done with software plugs.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like the choices for that are overwhelming. So when you go into a project, do you have like an idea of the sound that you're going for and maybe know what kind of amps to pick, or is it more of a kind of intuitive process that you're just, making it up as you go along?
I'm very much a preset person. I like to just click through presets until I find something that's close. No, I have no idea when I'm going in. I'll start out with just a drum beat. Sometimes I'll go and I'll be like, I want to do a song in 7 or 11 or 13. 13, God, that song's like 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 3 because Zappa did, that song 13. So I was like, I got to do a song of 13. But so that's the only time that I think I'll go in is if I have like a time signature that I want. But otherwise, I'll just drop in a loop, come up with a riff. And then as far as the software plugins go, sometimes I'll just click through and I'll be like, whoa, that sounded, click through the presets. And I'm like, particularly in Guitar Rig, I'm like, wow, yeah, that's the exact, I want like the country crunch there. And I was like, I didn't even think I'd want that. But that's what's so great about it is that if later I'm like, I'm going through like a twang thing here. No, let's turn the song into a heavy metal song. Boom, I go on to like the Marshall or whatever else, and it's just like, you get the heavy guitars there, the riffing.
Sure, but I imagine there must be some presets that you like get comfortable with and you keep coming back to. Yeah, does that happen?
Well, I think like with Denim Robot, I can get what's really nice about it is that because we are going to play it live, I can't go too far into stuff that can't be performed live. So I generally stick to the jazz chorus because I have a Roland JC120 that I play out with live. I stay usually on that amp model for the most part with Denim Robot. Yeah. But for stuff that I record on my solo, I got no plans to take that stuff out unless somebody wants to join me, and I don't see that happening.
Yeah. So you think that's just going to stay like basically just like a recording project?
Sure. Yeah. Because I like to release. I love the process of recording in the studio. I love taking something from nothing and turning it into a final mix because I think there's so much art that you can add into mixing that a lot of musicians don't get to experience. And it's that mixing, when you're laboring over something that it's recorded a certain way and everything sounds clean, but you're like, I just want to add something. It's not gritty enough. I think I spend so much of my time trying to degrade high quality recordings, which is something that wasn't done a long time ago. Everybody wanted the most polished, cleanest drum sound or cleanest guitar, and it's like, no, I want to bring some of that dirt back.
Yeah, and that's interesting. That's a thing that we talk about a lot. How with how accessible all this recording stuff is becoming and how it's easier to create a more professional produced sound, that it seems likely that we're going to get to a point where there's going to be some pushback against that and we're going to go back to more of that lo-fi sound. And I'm hearing that in your music.
Yeah, and I think that, and also trying to do it with music videos and stuff like that. I'm not like and not to take away from people that just love vinyl and analog and all that stuff. It's not so much that I'm obsessive in that way that I want to do things on old equipment, but I feel like that there is some artistry that's involved in conveying a message through the mix, and that can get lost when the drums sound so clean. It's like some of these drum plugins I use. What is the? It's the Contact player. We use it all the time. What is it?
Studio Drummer?
Studio Drummer. Yeah, and they boast on it that it's like, everything was recorded so cleanly. You can get the mic, all these different mics. You can choose all these different reverbs and everything and EQs. And I'm like, yeah, but what if I want that to sound like it was recorded in some shitty bar? Like, I mean, it's like I did one song on the last album that I wanted to make it sound like it was recorded live in the 70s, and I had to really just go to town on killing the quality of the drums. I was squashing. I was like, I want it to sound like these mics are out of phase and this EQ's all messed up, because that's what the song really called for. It called for, someone slobbering all over the mics and hearing that, and hearing somebody in the audience screaming at him. That's what I love about bootlegs, is that it just, this is obviously artificially created, but it was created with that intent to kind of create that atmosphere of a bootleg. And
right. No, it's interesting. It seems like it's at this point almost harder to create a more raw lo-fi sound than it is to create a more produced sound. Like, what a strange time.
Well, and then you kind of got to ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? I
Right.
mean, I do it because I enjoy it and think that it expresses something. I don't know if people like to hear it. I remember when I first heard Ween, that Pod album, just so lo-fi tape, recordings, and it's basically unlistenable to a lot of people, but you learn to like love that. And yeah, I don't. It's just it's funny because we don't have that. I think if you would ask them then, like, if we would have recorded on better gear, yeah, let's jump on that. It was because of the limitations that they had financially,
Right.
and gear wise. Now we don't have those limitations, so people would be like, well, why the hell would you want to go back to that? Are you like some hip? Maybe I'm a hipster, but I don't see it again as like being obsessed with vinyl or thinking that it's better. I think that
Right.
sometimes my music, if it like when it starts out as polished as it is, it's like, yeah, like I'm not a good enough musician for this. It needs to be a little rougher here.
Sure. It's almost like the overall production gives a certain quality to the music itself, and it's almost like when you don't have those variations in the quality, it's all the music out there in that sense sounds the same. So it's I think it just adds a little more interest and kind of texture to your music.
Right.
Yeah, you would agree with that.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes I'm just like, I listen to it, I'm just like, what the hell? So that's, I think, a good way to look at it. I would hope people saw it positively and not just assume that I don't know what I'm doing. But ultimately, who cares?
Right. So let's take a break here and let's listen to one of your tracks. So Chloroform, you want to play that one first?
Sure.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Okay, so this was the one that on my last album, Drivel. This was the only real lo-fi one. Most of those songs, I had some doo-wop songs. I had some, or one doo-wop song. I had a lot of more progressive time signature stuff. But this song, I really tried to go lo-fi and get it to sound like that old, like Ween or Bongwater or those early 90s lo-fi bands. And it was difficult. I actually wrote a blog about it on the Sunshine Sound thing, about what I specifically used. I was using the tape delay plugin, and you got to play around with that, with like pushing the wet all the way through and kicking the dry down, and obviously turn the actual delay off, but just adding just the, trying to subtly introduce some of these artifacts in there to make it, rough around the edges. And I think it really did well on this album. On this song, it came out good. But again, playing this live, it's like it just wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't even know how you would get that same feeling across.
And
live.
I think playing it straight,
Right.
it would be lost in that song. So.
Yeah. So just to recap on this song, the drums are from it's not a live drummer, right?
No, I believe that's a good question. I think that these drums,
Because you have had live drummers on some of
Yes.
your albums.
my first two albums, I had the first album for Karen, which was all instrumental songs. I had a good friend Rico Rico Callahan play on those.
That was in
And it was always
Vermont,
difficult
right?
because what I would do, and then I had my buddy Kale play on the second album, and they both did just a fantastic job. And it was difficult because, we keep all of these songs were recorded to a metronome, so I would go with them to a pre-recorded drum loop, right? And I would go to them and I would say, I'd take the drum loop off and I'd say, could you play to this metronome and the rest of the music here? And that is, I'm starting to realize how much of a challenge that is to most drummers who are used to kind of being in control of and a lot of them can play to metronomes fine. It's just that the music itself, which maybe have a swing to it or whatever, but they essentially aren't driving the car, as it were. And that was really a challenge. And there were some points of frustration, I think, all around. And it was, I think, mostly on my end. And I wasn't frustrated. They were frustrated with me, and I think they should have been. Because we probably should have started with them and do it that way. But ultimately, it turned out great. But to answer your question, this one was done with studio drummer, I believe. And then what I did, to get it to sound like it was like a winding down cassette tape, I had the drums that say, 160 beats per minute, and ultimately my goal would be like 110 or something like that. I actually used the time and pitch plugin to slow it down. And then I had to play, I think I did this with the guitar as well, I had to play it really fast to like 160, 180. And then I slowed it down through this plugin, so it sounded like it was winding down.
Oh, that's really cool.
Well, it had all these problems with pops and things like that I didn't expect, and some pops are okay and some weren't, and it was just the going back and forth between does it sound too bad, or is it just what I wanted?
Here's the line,
yeah, because I don't want it to sound totally unlistenable and awful, but I want it to sound a little bad. So there you go.
All right. So let's take a break here and we'll listen to that track Chloroform by Tommy Bobcat.
Racing inwards from the outdoors, spinning like a top until I reach the final floor. Never know quite when clear, but then I'll start and then I feel a hollow bit. Turning on to wears softly, our fingers snap and then the moon becomes deceitful. Oh, carry me sweet chemical, fading memory I never wanted to see. Reminds me sweet chloroform. You keep reminding me sweet chloroform. November, yesterday's gone and the ground beneath me quivers. I fell upon a shooting star, head first into sleep, giving credence to a lie. Any progress I perceive swells from the hall and then the strangers setting free. Another year, it's all the same, and then I stepped in my own fear.
Okay, and we're back.
All right. What a song that was. I actually have a video to go with that song.
Oh, that's
if you're
right.
interested.
Yeah, so what was this? That was the one that you used like some stock footage for?
Oh, geez. That one was, it had like a 5-minute intro of me trying to do the Back to the Future thing where, you know, he had Marty in two scenes, basically talking to himself. So I did that at the beginning. And then, yeah, I had some stock footage of some wars and like a Vietnam footage that was in the public domain on archive. And then I think it was some like medication, like constipation, menstrual cramps or something overlaying on top of that, like
Nice.
some prescription drug commercials.
Yeah. Prescription drug commercials are kind of a trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, fit really well.
Yeah, it was a nice contrast with the war and
Yeah. It's interesting how like with music videos kind of lend themselves to having a experimental kind of vibe to them. Like doesn't matter the genre of music, you can get kind of crazy in the videos. So it matches well with your your music as well.
well, and that leads to another thing that I'd like to discuss is, you know, we were both watching remember that Go West video last night from what was that, late 80s. It's on the Pretty Woman soundtrack. And it's like, you just have all this random stuff happening in the video. I feel kind of bad for that lead singer because he's like, you know, they're telling him to just like dance around awkwardly and sing into a monkey wrench and like all this wacky stuff, and it's like, you know, you got
a gorilla in there.
you got a gorilla that pops up for no reason. You got a guy playing hockey.
Got the Pope.
Yeah, some like kind of like what do you call it? Like just
mariachi
skimpy
bands.
clothing
Yeah.
women and scantily clad. But so that kind of leads to the question of like, is that experimental or is that just randomness trying to parade as experimental? And I don't really have an answer to that. Like, I have my own opinions on it, but again, that's just my opinion. It's like somebody could look at stuff I do or look at, any experimental filmmaker, doing music videos or just regular videos and be like, I could do that, like it's just random stuff. And it's like, well, it kind of comes back to that question, like, do you have to know the rules and know what you're doing to break them? Or can you just do whatever and that's the art itself? And is there something beyond the randomness that it's kind of like people can kind of sort of collectively agree, like, he's doing something, there's something more to this than just throwing things together. But I don't know. Sometimes I think I just throw things together. So it's just...
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to conceptualize these things. But that brings up the question, though, like, what is experimental music? Is there a definition?
And I think this is so hard to answer because, we were at a couple nights ago at the Open Oscillator and thinking, what, this thing is so fantastic and it's great. Like, if we did something like this for experimental music, if we had like an experimental open mic, and then it's like, well, what, by definition, it's not supposed to have any parameters to it. So wouldn't that just be an open mic? It's like, could someone just get up there and just stand there for 5 minutes? And that's, that's performance art. I'm fine with that. But how is an experimental open mic different than just open mic? And
Yeah.
that's where it got difficult, because I may have in my head, I know what experimental music is when I hear it because it's just weird, but the tastes can vary.
Right. Yeah. It's almost just like it's experimental if you can't easily put it in another genre.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
but then you think about it and it's like it's almost like every genre of music started out that way. So what's something that might be experimental today we might have a new name for it at some point. Maybe you're just ahead of your time, Tommy.
Yeah, right. No, it's Zappa was ahead of his. Well, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it is funny because, it's like Zappa used to get so upset with hearing stuff like that. Like there's that famous interview you can find on YouTube where he's just talking about like asking him to name these. They're giving him a list of these bands, and he's like, "Tell me if they're progressive rock or not." And he's just like, and asking if himself is progressive rock, and it's like, nobody can figure out what that even means.
Yeah.
Or, the answer is sometimes. I mean, it's really for everybody. It's like, are you rock? Well, sometimes, it's like, and I love that answer. It's just sometimes.
Yeah. So who are you? So you obviously like Zappa. You can hear it in your music just a little bit. And I think it's just funny because anytime anyone makes any kind of experimental music, they like by default get compared to Zappa, but he's not the only one out there.
Well, and the Zappa one's really tough because I have had a lot of people tell me, they're like, "Wow, it sounds like Zappa," and it's really difficult because Zappa is such a more phenomenal musician than me that it's not. It's unfair to the point where it's like, just don't make that comparison, So that one's tough, but I do love Zappa, so I hope some of it would come through. But like I love Mr. Bungle was one that was huge to me because the whole John Zorn side of things, where you have Zappa, which is really complicated music at times. Sometimes it's silly, but mostly it's really complicated. And then there's the doo-wop, and it's just like really high quality stuff that was also silly, which made it great. But like the John Zorn side, where you sort of paved the way to Mr. Bungle and all them, is there's an abrasiveness to it that I really took to. And I think with bands like Bongwater and early Ween, it's kind of that, like with the mix as well, is like and that's kind of what I view more as experimental and different from progressive, which, not the fancy time signatures and difficulty, but just rawness, but not raw in a way of like heavy metal, like screaming at you, but raw in a sort of almost unlistenable abrasiveness. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you think that, I think the fact that you are an audio engineer kind of helps to create your music. And I think probably if you were just, like someone who just played acoustic guitar and wrote songs that way and didn't know about all this stuff, or maybe were, alive at a time where Logic wasn't so accessible to make these drum loops and things, it's just, I think your music would look a lot different. So it's like, that's interesting that's kind of, the fact that you are an audio engineer has a big influence on your music.
It's a good point. I'm not even sure I'd be a musician if it wasn't for the ability to record it like this. I do love playing in bands and stuff like that, but the studio and doing the tracks, I think I'll do that forever. Not to say that I could take or leave playing in a band, because it's just, I have to. It's like Woody Allen and the eggs, I need the eggs. But that, it's just the relationships, band members and all that.
Sure.
Like, that's the one thing about making your music on your own, is it's just you and the machine. But I think you're right, because I don't think that I would just do it on a Casio or like a Fisher Price thing.
Yeah.
There's not enough control there where I can do stuff.
Sure.
So
Yeah. 'Cause I always see, like, being a musician, like, there's different aspects to it, right? So you kind of have, and I feel like each musician enjoys different parts of being a musician better. So the aspects that I see are kind of like practicing, like learning technique and perhaps learning other people's music. So that's one quadrant. And then you have writing music, which is kind of its own thing. Then you have recording and that whole process, and then you have performing. So that's how I see it. Personally, I think my favorite part is writing music and creating. But for you, what do you think your favorite?
Well, it's interesting because I think that I fuse writing and recording together. I've never written a song. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think early on I had an acoustic guitar and did some songs and wrote them beforehand. But boy, I can't remember the last time that I came up with something that wasn't being recorded at the time with the intention of creating a song through the recording. So those are not separate processes for me.
Huh, interesting. Yeah.
Because I can't write a song. I think that's where the difficulty is. Everyone else I've met or played music with, they would just, they'd be playing guitar or whatever and come up with it. They're like, yeah, I came up with this on a keyboard, I came up with it on a guitar, and now you add your part. I ran into a lot of difficulty with bands because to me, a song isn't created until its final product, which to me is the studio, a studio track. So my last band, Guides for the Future, I would have this thing where I would have to come up with all of the parts of the song, including the drum and the guitar and the bass and vocals and everything, and record those. And then the band members would be like, hey, I wanted to add, you're just writing all my stuff. And I'm like, I don't mean to do that. You can do whatever you want with it. But to me, the song isn't written. It doesn't feel written until all of that stuff is done.
Yeah.
And I don't know if other people have that problem, but
yeah, it's different from how I write music and other bands that I've been in. So that's interesting. Yeah. So let's listen to, there's one other track I wanted to play. Remind me what it's called. I'm going to pronounce it wrong.
The pronunciation. It's actually
Bosentang?
Bosentang, which is a dog meat soup in Korea.
Okay, so first answer this question. Where do you come up with these song names?
Well, it's similar to I think the way that Ween does it is I get the name of the song first, usually, and then I write this. With instrumental music, it's always funny because you're like, how do they? This song isn't entirely instrumental, but it's for the most part. People are like, how do you come up with these song names for instrumentals? I think it's like kind of whatever pops in your head that seems to work with the song. I mean, that's the best answer I can give you. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's just, wow, I never heard that word before.
Right.
Let's go with that.
And I think that that humor is an important element to your music.
But it's not, most of the time, it's not intentional. I appreciate you saying it's funny because I need to laugh, but sometimes I wonder whether I'm the only one laughing. But it is all supposed to, at the end of the day, I would prefer people to laugh at my music. All of it. If that's what people walked away feeling, that would be fantastic. That they were just laughing uncontrollably. I think there's a lot of people that view humor in music as somehow like a lower form of art. You look at, say, Weird Al or even Zappa. I think a lot of the reason that he wasn't taken seriously, I think that's the problem. You say taken seriously, but that you can't make respected because it was like, these puerile lyrics, these, and I guess I just disagree with that. It adds a lightness to it that you somewhat feel like you're laughing along with the band. And I think if you can also have the sad side with it as well, and that's something that Ween did phenomenally. They would have just a tear-jerking song, and then just something totally silly, like "I'm in the mood to move" or something like that.
And I think you see that in all elements of art, in movies as well. Like comedies are placed much lower than dramatic films, and I don't know why we're like, if you're laughing, it's not as respectable. It's the same thing with television shows or actors, even like comedic actors aren't. I think it's sometimes a lot harder to be a comedic actor than a dramatic actor. So it's just I don't know why as a society we don't seem to put as much value on things that make us laugh.
I think to some people, laughter unfortunately can be a way to not express real deep emotions. That it's kind of a surface thing. But I would argue that that's one form of laughter. But there's another form of laughter that is deeper than that. That kind of cuts through. sort of makes you see how silly everything is
Right.
in the
And
world.
it's a universal emotion.
Yeah,
you know?
that you can
And
experience with other
yeah.
people.
Mm-hmm.
Sadness sometimes can be isolating, but laughter is something that, you can all do it together. And there's nothing better than being on stage laughing uncontrollably with other people in your band, going like, you're looking down at your set list going, I get to play these silly, stupid songs in front of people. Like, this is so much fun to like have a good time and laugh.
Yeah.
Like, you laugh anymore.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember laughter?
All right, so let's play that track. Bosentang, that's what it was? Okay. All right, we'll be back in just a moment.
right.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Pretend we listened to it.
Oh, yes. We play this silly game where we pretend we listened to the track, but we didn't really. Sharing some podcast secrets here. All right. So do you miss playing in live bands? Do you think that's something I mean, Denim Robot plays out, but I mean, we're just a duo. Like, we're not like your typical, bass, drums, guitar, rock bands.
Yeah, well, I got to be honest with you. I have just crippling stage fright. I mean, it's even after years and years of doing it, I can't get up in front of people without like freaking out. And it's always good to do it. I mean, it's never I never should turn it down. Sometimes I do, but I love playing music in front of people. But it is so. I remember the first time, when I started playing back in law school. I would be nervous for weeks and months, and now I still get nervous a week out or whatever. And when you play regularly, it goes down to some extent, but it is, it's really tough. And I think that, I would love to be in a band. There's some drama that goes back and forth, but it's like any relationship. I mean, you find the right people and you're willing to go through that. So I'd absolutely love to do it. But, live performance is so hard to do. It's just frightening to no end. And you always, it's worth it. It's always worth it. But geez, like,
yeah. No, it's true though. And I think you even hear people who are, famous and been doing this for years and years that still experience that. And it's like, what is that? Why do we get scared just because people are looking at us? I don't know why, but
because you get up there and you look down at your guitar and you're like, do I know how to play this thing? I mean, honestly, like I hope I remember, because the more you think about it, the less you remember, and you're like, well, I don't know how to play guitar. I don't.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
Yeah, like you have that, it happens to me that like in the middle of performance, in the middle of a song, my brain's like, shit, I don't know the next part. But somehow I play it. But like, and it's also weird how we've talked about this, how time moves when you're on stage. Like, there's certain moments where it just seems like time freezes and then it goes really fast and then slows way down. It's just such a trip.
Yes, it is. And you don't know what you're gonna get. You don't know how the crowd's gonna go. You don't know what your performance is gonna be. And again, ultimately, it's that jumping over the edge that makes it so great and why it's so intoxicating to do it. But man, kind of confronting that fear every time is, I think every time we hear we have a gig, it's like I immediately want to run and hide under the couch. I mean, it's just like, oh God, like I want to play guitar in front of people. I just don't want to be scared to death to do it. But it's like they have to, it has to happen.
Yeah.
There's no other way.
But it's like, if you didn't feel that, I think you'd also miss out on all the excitement and the positive emotions. And I think your performance would suffer as well. Like, I think that's, when you can lean into that feeling and harness that energy, that's what draws audiences to you, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's I think that's the thing, is I assume that you have to be somewhat self-reflective and scared in order to tap into that emotion. I don't know. I mean, there may be people that can walk on stage that are phenomenally good that never have that. But God, I don't know how. How you could not. People say, I don't have stage fright. It's like, how is that possible? Do you know what you're doing?
Right. Yeah, but you're talking about like you're experiencing that in law school, but you're playing in bands in high school, right? Did you have like the same stage fright in high school?
Horribly terrible. I remember the first real live performance I played out in high school. I was lead guitar player, and I think everybody does this to some extent, but I basically had my amp on 1. And I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing with being a lead player, is that, like, I mean, I just...
So there was also a rhythm guitar player holding down the chords.
He was a great friend, and he was turned up loud. His parents bought him a Marshall half stack as a 14-year-old, and it's like... So no one could hear anything but him, but...
So what were you playing? Do you remember?
I think I was playing this Vibro Champ that
Oh,
I've got
really?
here.
Nice.
Yeah, my
Your trusty Vibro Champ.
the possession I've had the longest in my entire life. This 1972 or 76 Fender Silverface Vibro Champ that I still play. It needs a tube replaced, but
Oh yeah, but it's sweet.
it's my most prized possession. That thing is great.
Yeah. So even from the beginning, you had that stage fright.
Absolutely, and that's what kept me from continuing to pursue music until when we got to law school. I don't know if we have time for the
Sure.
So on that, because Christina and I met in law school, but the year before that, it was actually a kind of a phenomenal experience that got me turned on to music. Really, was that I met some people from law school, and of course everybody in that class was scared to death. We were first year students, and we were. Didn't know what we were doing, and scared, freaking out every day, getting called on and everything. And we needed some kind of outlet. And there was I had a friend of mine, Mark, that talked me into playing a benefit show that somebody had been putting on for pediatric. I think this was for I don't know what the thing was for. I guess that's not really. It was some kind of hurricane retreat.
Battle of the Bands?
No, this was before. There was some kind of hurricane.
Okay.
It was there during that time.
Is that when you played with the Pink Floyd cover?
Yes.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I had played in front of people, and I was sort of dragged.
And you're playing bass,
I was playing bass, yeah, and we it went great, and from there we turned that into a law school band, and we were in this microcosm where everybody loved it, and everybody came out, and we played all these parties and everything, and it was like, this is awesome. We're we're musicians and everything, and boy, once we got out into the real world and got into bands that didn't have that captive audience, it was like, oh yeah, like nobody cares.
Yeah,
but that was good. But it was a fun experience at the time, and it got me into music. It really, I'm really glad those guys got me to do it. But man, yeah, the stage fright every time. I was drinking a lot, and that doesn't help. It doesn't help your performance anyway.
No.
So.
But you kept doing it. That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for Tommy Bobcat?
I don't know. I don't like to think about that because I just try to do it every day. It's like if I wake up tomorrow and I don't want to play music, I won't play music. It would be a shame, but then I wouldn't have any guilt because I don't want to play music. But I'd like to keep doing Denim Robot. We got an album that we're kind of closing in on getting done. I'm about halfway through another solo album.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to play out live more, stage fright aside, but hoping to just keep and possibly get into maybe doing some producing. I like that side of it. I help some people in some other projects. And just kind of that, like, trying to pull the best out of these great musicians, particularly in the studio, like, adding comments like, hey, what if you did this here or this there, and having it actually work for them. I like that side of it well, as long as I'm helpful and not, ruining it for them.
Sure.
So,
Oh, that's great.
anyway,
And so if people want to check out your solo music, where can they find it?
you can go to my website, tommybobcat.com, or I am on Spotify. Again, Tommy Bobcat. I don't know if you need that spelled out, but it's
I think it's
yeah.
spelled how it sounds.
So,
Tommy
yeah.
with an I.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Tommy. So thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So thanks again for listening to the Sunshine Sound podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, and you can check out older episodes at sunshinesoundcenter.org. Also, feel free to shoot me an email if you have any suggestions for guests or any other feedback, or you just want to chat, and I'm at Christine with a C at sunshinesoundcenter.org. So thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon. Have a beautiful day.